Hey guys, today we're going to continue talking about clauses and phrases. Really quick, don't forget to take notes on this information. You will want to have it in your notebook. We're going to talk about these concepts in class throughout the semester, and you want to have a dedicated place to be able to find this information. All right. So we have talked about phrases. We know that a phrase is a collection of words that does not contain a subject acting on a verb. We also know that a clause is a collection of words containing a subject acting on a verb. So phrase doesn't have it, clause does have it. Okay. Just as a quick refresher, a noun, right? Just having a noun means that we have a person, place, thing, concept, or idea mentioned in our sentence. However, we might have more than one noun in the sentence. One of these needs to be a subject, which is who or what is doing the action in a particular sentence. If we don't have that, we don't have a sentence. Similarly, we have to have a verb, which is an action or a state of being. Okay, we have to have this in our sentence. If we don't have who or what is doing the action of a sentence, if we don't have an action or a state of being, we have a fragment, which is a construction that is trying to be a sentence. It's in our whatever it is that we're writing as in the place of a sentence, but it's missing a subject, a verb, or both a subject and a verb. All right, so now we're going to take the next step and talk about the different kinds of clauses that you are likely to encounter in your own writing, as well as when you're reading or looking at other people's information. So most folks are familiar with the idea of an independent clause, even if you don't know the terminology. So an independent clause is just a construction. It's a collection of words containing a subject acting on a verb, and it stands alone. I can say, I am going to the movies later, and this stands alone. It's a statement. You don't have any questions about this. You as the audience have all the information that you need to understand what I'm doing, where I'm going, when I'm doing it. Okay. This is an independent clause. It is has everything it needs to function in the world. You may also, though, run into a dependent clause. Dependent clauses can be a little bit more confusing because folks tend to think of them as incomplete sentences. It needs a little bit more information to make it make sense. So when people are looking at, say, a statement that's made in answer to a question, if somebody was like, where are you going? And I say, to the movies. Yes, that's a sentence fragment, but the audience still has sufficient context to understand it. It doesn't make it a clause, okay? But the audience is still going to understand it. So a dependent clause is still a clause. It contains a subject acting on a verb. However, it also contains what I like to call a dependent word. This is grammatically known as a subordinate or subordinating conjunction. Super fancy terminology. In class, we're just going to call it a dependent word to remind us that this sets up a dependent clause. Okay, so here's what that looks like. Okay, right here we have our subject. It's acting on our verb. We have all the information here. If we were to add a word to the beginning of this sentence, let's add the word if. If I am going to the movies later, notice now that, first of all, we read it differently. We read it and we sound almost expectant, like we're going to finish this sentence. Okay, subordinating conjunctions, there's quite a list of them. There's actually more than 70 in the English language. Here's a list of some common subordinating phrases, clause or conjunctions, etc. Okay, all of these words, if we add them to the beginning of a clause, it's pretty clear that we're going to need more information. If I'm going to the movies later, I had better get the dishes done, or I'd better finish up my homework. Because I am going to the movies later, if we wanted to switch this out for something else, because I'm going to the movies later, I need to finish my chores now, or I shouldn't watch a movie right now, or something like that, right? Maybe in order to go to the movies later, although now this isn't a clause, in order for you to go to the movies later, you will need to put gas in your car, okay? Something like this. All of these, this information right here makes this construction, this clause, require more information to make sense. A dependent clause relies on an independent clause to be complete. If we don't have an independent clause with this, we don't know the rest of the story. We don't know what the writer is talking about. Okay? Now, earlier in an example a minute ago, I started off with this word because I am going to the movies later. Okay. You have probably had a teacher who told you you are never ever allowed to begin a sentence with the word because. I would say hands up, but we're not in the class and I won't be able to see that, okay? I would be curious. You can leave a comment or in your discussion board post. You should let me know if your teacher ever told you that you weren't allowed to begin a sentence with because. They do this because much of the time, folks will do this for effect, okay? Or they'll do it without realizing that they have an incomplete sentence. So we might say something like, I need to do my homework now. Hopefully you can spell sometimes better than I can. There we go. Okay, so we have this sentence right here, and then we follow it with, because I'm going to the movies later. Notice that this period right here, most of us, probably all of us, know that a period ends a sentence. It ends a thought. It says stop right here. Okay, so we stop right here. And so this tells the audience, this period over here, tells the audience that this construction is a brand new sentence. Now remember that a dependent clause relies on an independent clause to be complete. So we're reading this as a sentence. I need to do my homework now. That's an independent clause. I could walk in to the classroom, to the grocery store, whatever, look at somebody. I need to do my homework now. They'd be like, okay, off you go then. Okay. But if I walk into the grocery store up to a random stranger and I'm like, because I'm going to the movies later, right? They're going to think I'm crazy for two reasons. One, I'm walking up and talking to a random stranger. Two, I am not giving them any useful information. They need to know what comes next. So when we do this, even though we assume that the reader's going to imply that these two sentences go together, it's our responsibility as the writer to make sure that the dependent clause goes with its independent clause. Okay? They're buddies. They go together. They're the very best of friends. So when you are writing your sentences, you need to make sure, you need to check your clauses to see, are they dependent clauses or are they independent clauses? Do they have a word in them that is causing them to rely on information that comes before or that follows them? For instance, I could also say something like, when I get up in the morning, I make coffee. That spelling thing, you guys, it's awesome. Okay, so in this case, the independent clause comes first, and we have the dependent clause following it. Don't worry about this punctuation right now. We're going to talk about that very soon, but not right this minute. In this case, the dependent clause, when this happens, okay? In this case, our dependent clause is coming first. The independent comes after it. It doesn't matter which order they appear in the sentence. What matters is when you have a dependent word or a dependent phrase like due to or in order to or things like that, we have the independent clause coming to finish the sentence. If we don't have that, if the audience only gets this information, if they only get, whoops, did that backwards, if they only get this information right here, then they're getting sentence fragments. Now, this is the part that sounds really funny because we're like, they have a subject, they have a verb. That's true, but we need the independent clause to give us the primary subject and verb of the sentence. Like, so-and-so needs to be picked up now because I'm going to the movies later, right? I might not be the subject of the sentence, but we're saying this has to be done now because I can't do it later. I'll be at the movies, okay? When I get up in the morning, maybe the rest of this sentence is supposed to be, my husband makes coffee, right? This may not be the primary subject and verb of the sentence. If it is, we need to take off this dependent word and just let it be, let I get up in the morning be the sentence, or I'm going to the movies later, all right? So what I want you guys to do is to go through the sentences that you wrote for your previous exercise to look at the different things that you've labeled phrases and clauses. Double check them. Make sure that you still, if you're sure that this is a phrase, awesome. If you feel like it's a clause, go ahead and note that it's a clause and explain why you've realized it's a clause. But I want you specifically to look at your clauses, look at how they're made, check for these dependent words, and just make a note whether you have an independent clause or a dependent clause. This is going to figure in our next assignment, which we're going to move into talking about the types of sentences. So all this comes together to help us understand how to build sentences with sentence variety. Okay, so we need to understand what types of constructions we're working with in order to move into the next piece, which is creating effective sentences that are complete, that have everything we need, and the reader's not going to have any questions left over. All right, so go through, I have an assignment for you in the course, and you guys are going to look at what you guys, as I said, did last time. Go ahead and label those as independent, dependent. If you have questions left over, as always, please feel free to contact me. I would be happy to walk you through some examples or answer any questions or talk about it further.